Okay, technology works. This is Eli Ocheltree of the SnoKing Beekeepers Association. This is our monthly meeting, and it's February 16th, 2022. We're going to talk about how to inspect your hives like a ninja, how to unobtrusively sneak into the hives. So this is a little tongue-in-cheek. But on the other hand, all of us doing beekeeping have learned ways to make beekeeping less stressful on us and less stressful on the bees. And sometimes we don't give ourselves credit for having learned this. In the first year, I consider the learning curve very steep, but give yourself credit. Everything we say that you do already or you do better, give yourself a little credit. And when you go to mentor or help someone else out, if someone has actually said out loud, yeah, I do that because, and it's something odd you do, and they're watching you, and you don't let them put the smoker on top of the hive that you're not inspecting. You say, no, don't do that. Don't wake those bees up yet. We're going to do this hive first. Don't put something on that hive right now. That sort of thing you do without even thinking about it. But I'm going to talk about it so that you can see how smart a beekeeper you are and how ninja your technique is. Well, first of all, we should kind of talk about, should you be opening your hives at all in winter? How much inspection should you be doing? How much can you see or know is going on inside? One way or another, observe. The true ninja observes, right? Observes the target, watches its habits, its movements, knows the program, the daily rhythms, right? And the yearly rhythms of the bees, okay? But that you have to know your target. You observe first, you make the plan, you decide what your goal is. And whatever you do is going to be stealth, non-obtrusive, secretive. They won't even see you walking past them. It's going to be like Jedi mind tricks. You know, it's going to be that good. And you're looking for the least disruption, which is going to produce the least stress. And this is the all-important caveat, and this is a throw things out for conversation and discussion talk. It's not a talk where I pretend I know it all. So that's my disclaimer. My disclaimer is everybody has a different opinion. Should you even be going in the winter? And this has often been controversial. So I found a researcher who says, oh yeah, look at this chart. And especially if you are on the West Coast, with the number of inspections, your chances of survival go up for your hives. They took the basic regions of the United States. Look at the West Coast. The more inspections, the more come out alive. The average number of inspections is basically 2.5. I don't know if they mean that they went through every hive in the apiary, but they go out and at least inspect some of the hives in their apiaries, and it increases it. And I find that an interesting idea that the West Coast, I assume they're including all of California, but quite a bit of it is colder maritime climate. And I'm wondering if that's part of why our winter season is different and we do some things differently. If you want to find this talk, it's on our playlist on YouTube, and it's under one of the conference playlists. I can help you get the link if you can't find it. But I just thought this was really interesting, especially for our area. Some sort of winter inspection is important. Okay, so you already know these really, but think of it, when you go into beekeeping, think of it as you are disguising yourself. You're moving silently. You're looking for the non-invasive, and then when you have to move in, it's not sudden, it's gentle, it's smooth. You just glide through, right? You're planning for minimal disruption. Okay, I'm not really a martial arts expert. You probably guessed that. But this is my anime version in my head of ninja. You're planning for minimal disruption. You don't even want to be noticed. And you observe the target's behavior. Watch that target time of day, year. And we know a lot of what our bees do because we take beekeeping classes, and we learn all about temperature and cluster and bee habits and how they do things. We can use all of that, and you do. Even if you never thought about it, you do use it. we like to, just like ninjas, distract, right? They do the poof of smoke or whatever and disappear. Okay, we'd use a smoker. Some people use peppermint oil, light syrup, or water, often sprayed on the bees if they're starting to get a little rowdy instead of smoke. Some people spray peppermint, notice not spearmint or lemongrass, not an attractant, but true peppermint oil. Some people spray it on they actually put it on their hands or spray it on their suits first. And they say it works, and I've tried it, and it worked a little, at least for a while. If I was doing a quick visit, it would work. And just like a ninja, we're not looking for direct contact and conflict. We have a goal, we have a target, we're going to achieve our aims. And really, when you think about it, this kind of goes along with your success at keeping bees. The Journeyman's Manual, you have to get to the 3rd tier before WASBA puts in its manual the basics. All you got to do is keep the bees dry, feed them, make sure they get fed whatever they need, and treat them for mites. It's really that simple. I mean, keep it simple, silly. Dry, fed, treated. But we do tend to overmanagement. And sometimes overmanagement is abrupt changes that we don't really need for our colonies to survive, and they really stress them and us sometimes. And a lot of the dry, fed, treated is proactive, not reactive. And then a lot of what we need to do as a beekeeper is not an invasive hive inspection. It's really non-invasive. It's exterior. It's monitoring. And winter survival, apparently, according to that one study, is a factor, especially in our area. A lot of times you do this just when you're moving your bees around. When you first start with bees, you might be brushing them a lot and they go up in the air. And then after a while, somebody hopefully says, you know, just a little more smoke, or just put your hand on a frame. If you actually place your hand down on a frame, the bees move out of the way. You want to see if there's eggs there, you just take your hand, glove, if you're welcome to have gloves. I use gloves. And put it down, and you will see the bees just move out of the way. This is because of the way bees behave. There's tens of thousands of bees in a hive, and they're constantly bumping each other. So if you bump them, that's not a problem. They're okay with being bumped. And so you could, but brushing, no, that's not natural. But you can put your hand down, and they'll just move out of the way, and you can see the part of the frame you wanted to see. When you transfer bees, at first you might try the shaking, but it takes you usually not very long to learn that it's really the firm single shape that will transfer bees into a nuke, into a split you're making, or you're trying to put them through a queen excluder. You're doing something that it's that firm shake, not the irritating, like being brushed. Small shakes drive them nuts. I love the do no harm. And ninjas kind of do this. They don't cause trouble unless they have to. No sudden changes unless it was necessary to save the hive. Okay, bear knocked your hives over. You're going to do whatever it takes. That 60 degrees rule is one of the reasons for the 60 degrees rule. Isn't just so you can be comfortable at that temperature, but the disturbed bees can easily return before they get too chilled. They can probably do that at 50, 55, but 60, everything is better. They can come back. They can get the brood warmed again quickly, because they need to heat the brood back up to its 92 up to 95 degrees, right in there, where brood needs to be kept to develop. You know, if you put insulation on, I would recommend not ripping it off. Like Michael was talking about, when the daytime temps are not going lower than the 40s. You know, especially top insulation. I'm beginning to think top insulation should be left on year-round. Wraps, if you had them on, I would be careful about pulling them off and then having a sudden freeze. If you've encouraged the brood nest to get a certain size, then the bees can't come. There aren't enough adult bees necessarily to really protect a large brood nest in a growing spring hive against a sudden drop in temperature. And we do have late freezes. I know in my area, April is very possible. Doing the dry sugar and then the changeover. We already sort of talked about that in questions and answers. That, yeah, doing that too soon isn't going to help them. And it could some people feel it puts moisture in the hive if you go to wet feed sugar syrup too early. I would warn people about being fooled about pollen coming in from those hazelnuts and other native ornamental blooms this early, because pollen is not carbs. Still be checking that they have stores, that they have carb stores, sugar, honey. I take care of dead outs promptly. Some people just seal them up and leave them. In our sloppy wet weather, I'm afraid to do that, and I don't want to encourage robbing, even if it's one colony to another. I think that sets a bad precedent. And if it's from an apiary that you didn't know is close to you, they're going to bring in whatever diseases they have. So I go ahead, and I have the time to clean them and scrape them out now. Oh, I'm sorry, this slide's out of order. I didn't get everything perfectly in order. Proactive versus reactive. A lot of what you do when you study your target and you observe and you know when to move in and how fast to move in and how drastic, a lot of that has to do with seasonality and nature's calendar and the way the bees work. And that is something that after your first year starts to make more sense. You wish you could just plan out the whole year, but you end up going with the temperatures, waiting. Everything is dependent on those temperatures, nighttime and daytime temperatures, the highs and the lows. And if you're like me, you need a weather station, which I actually put in some graphs off my weather station, and it keeps track for me of how high and low things are going, so I don't have to try to check a thermometer. Almost everything, your Varroa treatments, how fast you're going to be supering, everything is going to be dependent on temperatures. Hive humidity is important because the bees need to control it. Okay, so you're going to go in for be a ninja. So the first thing you got to do is you got to have your disguise. And mainly your disguise as a ninja is to not be noticed. That's what you're working at. And that, when I was teaching the journeyman class, we started going through how you would demonstrate that you knew how to care for your hives. And as we go along, a lot of this came out of that. You don't want to look like a predator. And so bee suits have traditionally been white, and that way you don't look dark like a predator. It's recommended you not wear furry, fuzzy things, that you don't have an odd smell that would attract the bees to you, and then they check you out and go, shouldn't be here. See, a ninja would never do that. Can you imagine a ninja wearing loud perfume or something? Now, when you're sneaking in, you don't want to make any noises when you enter the house. So it's much the same for the bees, and part of your reward is that they don't get upset and fly up when you do it correctly, and you get to see them as they are in the hive. If you are careful about the way you smoke, the way you crack the little and let a little light in, little heat and humidity out, no resonance, if you're careful about how you do it. When you're breaking the propolis seal, if you can put your hand on top of the lid, especially when you get down to the inner cover. And the reason for an inner cover, one of the biggest reasons, is so that you're not prying the telescoping cover off, which would be a propolis pain if you didn't have an inner cover. So the inner cover is going to lift off fairly easily. Maybe you've got moisture shims on there and you're just checking the feed underneath it. But if you were going to go lower, when you insert your hive tool, you put your hand on top of the thing that could make the pop crack sound and push down to cut down that resonance, because bees are super sensitive to resonance. That's the same as hearing a loud crack throughout their hive. And if you are gentle about doing this, if you crack things, wait a little while the light, the temperature, the humidity inside the hive changes, give them some time to adjust, just like a ninja. Ninja suspects that the target realizes they're there, and the ninja freezes. Oh, red cellophane and red lights are really good because take advantage of the fact that bees are red light blind. However, they say that wearing red is not going to work because they see red as dark. So then you would look dark like a predator. Okay, you're on the ninja silent approach, unseen, coming from the back of the hive, worrying about cracking propolis seals. Now, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get into the hive if you don't have a lot of burr comb. So this kind of extraneous picture I have on the slide is a level. A lot of people don't realize a lot of your burr comb is not just top to bottom a bee space, and you hit the 3/8 and the bees decide they're going to fill it if it's any more than that, and sometimes even I think when it isn't. But if you go past that 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch, they are going to try to stuff some comb in there. But they also do it whenever things are out of kilter side to side. And if your hive is not leveled side to side, that's when they start to do bridge comb. I know I put a picture in here later that I can show you. You're also, so removing burr comb is going to cause a lot of disrupting the bees, but if you stay on top of it, it won't be as bad as trying to do it all at once later. But at this time of the year, you're not really worried about that, so I'm thinking more later. But if you heard a buzz because you've done something, you made a noise, you freeze like a ninja, you leave that lid open just a crack, you wait, maybe you spray and smoke again. So you're continuing your silent approach, approaching from behind. Actually, I took this picture years ago without ever thinking about ninja. From behind or the side, right? Don't block their line of flight. Temperature is really important, and again, the liquid dry feed, your Varroa treatments, there's a lot of them you can't do at this temperature, so there's a lot of things that are off the table anyway, even when you do go inside the hive. But take advantage of their clustering. You know they're not going to be up there when you check the feed if you just lift off the outer cover and the temperature's below. So it's kind of fun to think of yourself as a ninja when you're using a FLIR camera or just your knowledge of where the bees are. I'm using a FLIR camera this year to find out if bees really do rise from the bottom to the top, or if they just plain love the top because it's warmer and just go straight up there and spend the winter there and come down for the feed as needed. Sometimes I haven't seen every hive do it the same way. If I can get a chance to get all my pictures together, I'll let you know what I found. But we do know they cluster. Here is a beautiful example of a cluster here. Over on the left side, someone was checking it. This isn't me cracking my hives apart. Although if you were to do this quickly for some reason, the only problem is when you put that box back down again, it's going to be very hard to do without crushing bees. I would do it very gently, and incidentally, if no one has really thought about this, you do eventually, you can put bees straight down, you're going to catch some bees, or you can slide the bees, the last little bit, slide them, and the bees have, just give them time to move out of the way down between the seams, between the frames. But it is important to have a general idea of temperature. The temperatures at which your target is not going to be flying at all. How tight the cluster is going to be at what temperature, what ambient temperature outside, the temperature they have to maintain. And they actually start pulling in a little bit. They say as high as 57. And then actually the temperatures also tell you how fast they're using their feed, but I don't think I put that graph in. Like a good ninja, you are observing everything about where your target is before you ever think about entering the building. You're looking at the ground. Are there dead bees? Are there signs of something bothering the hive? Skunks, raccoons, or whatever. Are the dead bees on the ground? How many are fresh? And if a reasonable number. More right after a few days of rain, and if they're pushing them out, as someone mentioned in the chat already, that is a good sign. That's a sign that your hive is healthy and is able to do housekeeping duties and push a few bees out as they die each day. Traffic and flight patterns. After your first year of beekeeping especially, you start recognizing what they're doing. One of the weird things they're doing right now, if it's your first spring with an overwintered hive, you watch and you see them do some of these weird behaviors where individual bees go out and they sort of circle around aimlessly like 30 to 50 feet away from the hive, and they're scouting. They're looking to see what there is out there. If you go back closer to the hive, you can see when they're returning, the ones that are actually returning, we were talking about the pollen, different colors, not a lot. Some of the pollen baskets are really tiny or very thin. They tried, but I think they got too cold and had to come back. Some are just going out for the cleansing flights. And some I have seen orientating flights. Not a lot, but on a really warm day, some of the bees come out, and I don't know if it's fixed yet. Maybe someone else in this group knows. Whether it is just bees that have recently emerged, young bees, and they are setting their little GPSs. And I have a picture of an orientation flight coming up. The bees face the hive. A bunch of bees face the hive. And they kind of do a swaying back and forth. I actually have a video, but I don't think I can figure out how to play it. They sway like a few inches to each side, back and forth, a whole bunch of them. It's like they're line dancing or disco dancing, where somebody says to the right, to the left, up and down. Everybody face the same way. It looks like that's what they're doing, and it may be some kind of, I don't know, telepathic oneness. Maybe they're doing something ninja here, where they are being one with each other and unified. I don't know, but I always think of it as they're setting their GPSs. This is home. I need to be able to come back here. But you'll know if anything looks really wrong if you are able to recognize now orientating flights, scouting, returning foragers, cleansing flights. They may rush out if you suddenly have sun after it's poured rain. And you go, are they swarming? And usually people seriously wonder that in the next few weeks, okay? It is okay to wonder that. But they rush out and then they come back. And it's just, if you needed toilet time and you hadn't been able to have it, because bees cannot defecate inside the hive, if you needed it, you'd rush out too. But sometimes it is so noticeable. It's amazing. Your slide out board. I highly recommend slide out boards. They are so good for checking what your hive is up to. I have some pictures of that coming up. And of course, we're not really recommending for most people, most days, that they go below the inner cover, but you're looking at the inner cover for increasing condensation. Maybe you need to make a little more crack, increase a little bit of upper ventilation. Maybe the slide out board works for you. Something to help if it's getting too wet. And moisture absorbency can only do so much. So if it's not enough, be checking. And brood rearing has started. When there's more bees and more little mouths to feed, that's also more little bodies, including the larvae and the adults, breathing in oxygen, taking in carbs, and breathing out CO2, carbon dioxide, and water, H2O. It's that basic formula from your high school biology classes. And they're going to be using up a lot of carbs to do that. So keep checking your honey stores by hefting or weighing. You can't go in. And if you're in doubt, just keep feeding them the dry feed for a while longer. So don't relax. Don't stop monitoring. Some people say, oh, they're getting pollen. They're okay. No, pollen is not those all-important carbs to feed thousands of residents. So the debris board. I love slide out boards. They are so much fun. It's garbageology. I think it's like mini archaeology. You're looking at what they discarded. And fresh wax, when they really get into wax building, pretty soon you're gonna see some fresh wax flakes that slipped past and fell down. Later in the season is more when you'll see the brown cappings, and they're reusing and they're expanding the brood nest, and that's older wax that has some propolis and other stuff mixed in. You can tell how many frames they're using, how much of the hive is active, assuming your screen is clear. Some of my screens, I think, are pretty well clogged with bees, so I can't see. With the dead bees that I can't reach with my tool that I'm trying to hook them out with. So, okay, can't always see. But if I can clear that off enough, I can see the debris that's falling down. Pollen pellets. Chalk brood mummies you'd usually see on the landing board, but you could see parts of that. It could get through the screen. Dead bees and parts inside the hive, you start worrying about robbing. And robbing can happen at any time of the year. Ants would be at a different time of the year. I think the ants are probably. But the slide out board. Okay, so this is winter. When I wanted to know, I had my hives totally shut down. And taking pictures is really neat. Even for counting mites, these cell phones, if you get good resolution, you can even count your mites by taking the pictures, clean off the board, put it back in, and just do your hives in the same number each time. And you can go inside where it's nice and warm and check. So this was one winter. They were throwing out the pollen patty here. I was checking for mites, but I was also checking to see how strong they looked. Had I estimated correctly that one was stronger than the other. The size of the Varroa mite, I had to throw this in. I know everybody who's older has seen lots of Varroa mites. But if you haven't seen this peculiar shape that's not really oval, it reminds me of butter clams. And they're arachnids, so they kind of look like kind of crab shape. It's not really oval, it's not really round. And it is small, the size of a pinhead, as they say, but how many people use a sewing pin anymore? So here it is next to a wooden match with a lot of other debris. And here I can tell this one's a much more active. This was a different time of the year. This wasn't winter time. Hive. Yeah, this actually looks like later in the summer when they're ripping apart the wax and little bits of wax are falling down as they reuse it. And a rejected pollen patty. That looks like late fall. So flight patterns, watching those. My notes are a little bit jumbled. I threw this together today. Entrances, you're watching those. You're looking in front of the hive on the ground. Oh, flight patterns. I know what I mean here. Entrances. What's coming in and out and how is it doing it? What's hanging out at the entrance in front of the hive versus if anything starts checking out the eaves, the sides and back of the hive soon as the weather warms, watch for robbers. And that wild flight pattern that the scouts are doing right now is kind of interesting. And they will start landing on sawdust and rotting wood and such. Everybody says that. And if anybody has a better explanation, then they are looking for micronutrients, possibly something out of the fungi that bee researchers are starting to study now. I'm just checking time to make sure that I finish by 8 and that everybody is in. Good. Watch out that pollen doesn't really completely feed a hive. Good sign. There's live foragers, live bees. They're functioning as a hive. Robbing screens. I really recommend them because the strongest hive is going to rob out the weakest hive. And if you're hoping to save both queens, you don't want that to happen. And in a lot of hives, if you have a lot, there's going to be strong and there's going to be weak, and bees are efficient. They aren't people, moral, compassionate critters, but they are efficient and they take if they can. It's important though, if you have robbing screens on, you've got to come with an on-off method. And I think the bungee cords is the best for me. Some people, they put their robbing screens on the front of the hives. They put them on with like cordless drills or hook and eye latches. I think I'm going for the bungee cord around the back of the hive, and then it hooks into the other side of the robbing screen. And you also have to clean out that dead bee berm that builds up behind a robbing screen, so that you can't expect them to do their work clearing out those dead bees if you make it too hard. Here's a picture of orientation in case you're a little bit lost. This was after, I think we'd had a couple weeks of rain, and they all came out, and I'm not that good with my camera. My camera isn't that good, but it's possible to catch that many because they are there hovering in front of the hive to the right. And they're just the angle. They're just hovering and doing this motion sort of back and forth, side to side, more than back and forth, and they're hovering in front of the hive. It's called orientation. Equalizing. Okay, being a ninja turn of personality here, when people tell me things like you should move strong and weak hives and switch positions because the strong one is probably stronger due to its position. Bees drift to one side or the other, maybe due to the wind or due to the sun. Maybe it's the wind protection for the individual hives gives them an advantage. If you are sure that all the hives are healthy, I would equalize instead of moving hives, which is a lot of work. There's a picture of my husband helping me move hives over. That's him inside the Pillsbury doughboy outfit. And that's how you have to strap it together with a moving screen on top. And okay, that's a lot of work and heavy lifting, even though that carrier really helps you lift. I recommend that you just wait a little while and equalize by transferring capped brood or stores, not the queen. Checking not the queen, but young bees and capped brood and maybe stores over to the hive you consider weaker. Moving hives is a lot of work. And there's a lot of things that don't have to be invasive. As you get ready to put that first box on, you may not even have to open up the hive, because top supering shouldn't have to be. And you know that just like the population of your beehives will go up and down in this curve January to December, the same thing kind of happens with visually what you see outside. Now, at this time of the year when you're peeking at the inner cover, often you'll see the bees hanging out here. Some of them might be helping with ventilation, and some of them, I guess, are just hanging out. But the inner cover is very handy for quite a number of things. When people want to keep their hives from swarming, they'll do things like move the strong and weak hives around, and that seems like an awful lot of work. I'm saying that's too hard. Sometimes with this time of the year, people do a procedure called reversing the supers. If the bees have moved to the top and you're afraid that they're going to get too big and swarm too fast, you make them realize they have space by flipping the emptier box to on top of the other one. You're reversing their order. It is harder, and it's more invasive to move frames. You can also move frames to help bees that aren't using the sides as much. You can do this, what is called frame rotation, and you drop frames down from below, push the bees out to the side, and then it's a system that's used. But I gotta admit, reversing supers is less invasive, as long as you're gentle about it and don't crush a queen or too many bees while you're moving the bees over. A tiny bit of smoke helps with that. Checking for swarm cells. You don't have to be super invasive after you feel you've gained some experience. You check for swarm cells. All you need to do is see the bottoms of the frames and have an idea of how your bees are doing. So you get down and lift. I might have a slightly better picture. You can lift higher than that, I do. But that's how you check, because swarm cells are found toward the center of the brood nest. This is the sort of thing that you know, but when you're explaining it to someone else what you're doing, or mentoring, or just give yourself credit. You already knew this, right? Those of you who already are keeping bees. You also, after you keep bees a while, realize you don't have to take out every frame. Sometimes a very beginner thinks that, and it's a good learning experience, but especially if it's not warm in the year yet, even if it's just barely 60, you don't really want to disrupt the bees that much. The real ninja never rolls the queen. The real ninja makes space like this on each side of the frame, more than enough bee space, wiggling maybe, and often some people take the last frame, but a lot of people say that that's going to be the safest frame to kind of push toward the wall, make a little space there, kind of squish the other ones over gently, and then pick up. Actually, it's better if you pick up in the middle of the frame. This is picking up the ends like this, you're more likely to crush bees with your fingers. So actually picking up in the middle, which is a picture of later. And when you do that, when you pick up one frame, now you can see down into the box, and you can see without picking up what the next frame looks like, at least on that full side. So you don't have to take every frame out. Here, if you're checking for you can pick up a box and look down and see how it's doing frequently. But also, when you've taken part of the frames out, you can look at the others, and you don't need to disrupt everything in the hive. So as a good beekeeper, the more efficiently you get at manipulating your frames and boxes, the less you're stressing yourself and the less you're stressing your bees. You're probably also saving a lot of time, but it doesn't happen right away. So give yourself credit for years of experience, or if it's 1 year, still, you've made a lot of progress. Here's picking up a comb by the middle, and you aren't going to trap. If you pick up a comb by these ears at the top of the frame, it's really easy to trap bees. It is much better to put your fingers here, and when you put your fingers here, the bees move out of the way. If you're trying to pick up by the corners, it's hard for the bees to move out of the way. You're much more likely to squish them. And then, let's see, I already talked about rolling the queen, getting the first, especially that first frame that comes out, getting it more than bee space away from the others so that you can lift it straight up and not squish bees. And it isn't just rolling the queen. If you're going to be a good ninja, you don't want to be setting off alarm pheromone by crushing a bunch of workers. Bad for you, bad for the bees. Then when you take out whole boxes, if you take out one box and you set it on a lid, never on the ground, unless you know where she is. And even then, I really hate crushing bees. And stacking boxes kitty corner keeps them from propolis sealing together when it gets hot. But it also means that you're not contacting the entire length and width of every hive box against the entire length and width of the next hive box. When you offset your hives, do I have a picture? Oh, I don't think so. If you do that, you're going to crush fewer bees. Give yourself credit for all this, right? Being a good ninja beekeeper. And this all really got started by looking at the Journeyman's Field Practical Evaluation, which sounds really scary. And I was reading through all the words, and I said, as I went through it, I said, hey, they're talking about being a ninja beekeeper. You're going to use smoke, right? And a good ninja has little distraction tricks like that. And you're going to use it properly. Cool white water vapor smoke, not dark gray sparks flying out smoke. You're going to use it judiciously, a little at a time. You smoke the entrance, maybe you crack the lid and smoke the upper entrance and right under the lid, and then you set the lid, maybe not all the way down, maybe you leave it cracked. You wait a second, do you hear a buzz? Often a hive tells you that it's not ready by the buzz, and you give it a little more smoke. You may never have noticed on internet YouTube videos, someone is opening a hive, and they smoke, and then they turn around and talk to you for a minute. They're actually waiting for the smoke to take effect. Same for a ninja. If there's an alarm, you hear a buzz, you wait. And you're changing light, temperature, and humidity for the bees too. You've got time. And then it was talking in this evaluation how you should have confidence in hive manipulation, gentle but predictable movements, no quick or jerky. Having the smoker available at all times, not necessarily smoking the daylights out of your bees, but having it there. Even when you first start, we tell beginners, better to have it than to have to stop everything, cover the hive back up, walk away, get the smoker going. Better to just have it. And that careful handling of the comb, I was talking about, and it's not just the queens, but it's also the worker bees, but the queen is the one you cannot lose. So, knowing how to use your smoker properly, come to a hive site if you're close enough to one of the hive sites if you're having trouble. And it is very common to have trouble lighting smokers. Not everyone grew up heating with wood, and we now have gas barbecues, and you just turn the gas on and you strike the match or the flint and it goes whoof, and it keeps going. Whereas with smokers, you need to get your base embers, base fuel going, and then to get the cool white smoke, you can put some weeds, especially green weeds or extra unburnt fuel on top. If you are in a dry area particularly, make sure no sparks are coming out. And again, you can use green weeds, unburnt fuel. If you're in a really dry area, you're probably not going to have green weeds. You're better off putting a little piece of steel wool, that kind that you use for furniture refinishing, or some fine screen, some fine metal mesh in there, window screen, or 1/8 should help. Then when you transport the smoker, a ninja would never drive off in a pickup truck, leaving the flames from a smoker that was set in the back, reaching up feet into the sky. That is something that really happens to people who do that. I've had heavy smoke once and had to remember to pull over. I never got flames leaping up. But you do a lot of calming techniques. As you do beekeeping, you start realizing, I don't have to do this roughly. When you are making splits, and when you watch people who are doing alcohol washes or making splits and they're shaking in extra young bees, you put your 5 frames into your nuke, you've made it up, you go get an extra nurse bee frame, brood frame, and you shake that in too. And that one firm shake, a bunch of bees go in. Why do you pick the brood nest frame after you've checked for the queen? Because young bees don't tend to fly up as much. You've got the right ones, they're going to stay, they're going to support that nuke or split that you're making better. And then you know your target, you know how it behaves, so you know some of those little targets that were out foraging are going to return to that original location. So when you make a split, the weaker hive should be in that location. You're using your target, its behavior. You have observed this. Swarms, when you collect swarms, you can, one thing that people do quite often is spray with sugar syrup, a light sugar syrup. They get busy feeding, especially if the swarm has been there, or you don't know how long the swarm's been there. We count on them having full stomachs and being focused on just clustering and waiting for a decision where to go. But if you didn't see that swarm land, you're not sure of that. Spraying them with sugar water, they have to stop, clean it off, clean it up, take care of it. And when you want to calm a swarm, you can do that. And also when you want them to accept the box that you shake them into or that you're transferring them later into, but even when you shake, if you can put a brood frame in there, old brood comb would work. Open brood frame is probably more realistic when you get back to the hive that you're going to install a swarm in. Then you can put the open brood frame in. The lemongrass oil, something that smells good if you are putting them on foundation that is absolutely new and it might not have the right smell. It's calming. They go straight to work. Bees like to be in a group and they like to be calmed down and know they've got a job. One calming ninja type strategy I got from this gal named Christy Hemingway. And the classic way that I was shown to do alcohol washes, you have to come up with a half cup of bees. And you should get them off the nurse bee, where the nurse bees are, off the brood frames. And they told us, and almost everybody I've ever heard of says, well, the way you do this is you get like a Rubbermaid, like that nice white Rubbermaid in the lower pitcher, and you take a whole frame, you check for the queen, and you do the firm shake in, bunch of nurse bees drop down, and they don't easily fly off if you use brood nest bees because they weren't foragers. It's not their first reaction. So, and then you tilt it and you scoop out your half cup of bees. Okay, there's an easier solution. The easier solution, is you take a flat-sided container. You pick the brood nest up. I just had to grab any frame I had around to show this the other day. You take the brood nest. You make sure the brood nest frame. Make sure the queen is not on there. Again, it's the step I always worry about. And take your flat-sided container and tickle the backs of the bees. You're not scraping them, but they will just fall off backwards. It's funny to watch. They will do it. And because they're nurse bees, fewer of them will fly up. And you haven't damaged the hooks on their feet. Every one of their 6 little feet, their tarsi, has hooks. And you don't want to rip that off. It's bad for them, irritates them. You're not a predator. You are a ninja. So you tickle them off and they fall off backwards. Then you put them in the easy check and it tells you whether you've got enough bees. There's inside lines. That's my system. I like it better than the white tub system, which I used for quite a while. Thank you, Christy Hemingway. I believe in picking up dead outs. You've got time to clean them out now before it gets busy. And life gets busy with beekeeping. Now, is this not enough ninja, quiet, gentle, predictable, walking past, they don't see you even coming, and they hardly notice you when you're in there. If that's not enough, journaling and reviewing your notes, because you're studying and observing your bees, continuing to study what's known about colony behavior, take lots of classes, and observing your bees. Now there's direct or indirect ways to observe your bees. I'm starting to collect data. I'm interested in that right now. And there's a lot of available data out there about conditions. And some of it's super local. And I'm looking at crunching some numbers. So the last few slides I have are on studying, realizing that your bee is going through these cycles and where you're entering the hive, when you should do mite treatments. And you really start to understand how if there's no brood at this time of the year, the mite population is going to hit its low. And then as the brood population, the blue line on this graph goes up, because the whole population went up. And also over on this other one, it shows you that the brood goes up. Brood population peaks about the time that hive population peaks. And then following that, the mite population will peak as the bee population starts to drop, and then there's more mites per 100 bees than there was before, and now you can detect them in alcohol washes, even though you couldn't earlier. Alcohol washes are a little bit disappointing in Western Washington. Maybe you want to observe your hives more, and it could be helpful. This is Ron Robinson's, he already showed this at the last, I think, or was it two? It might have been one or two meetings ago, monthly meetings ago, and he'd be happy to show you again when you come out to his hive site. Being able to observe your bees, and then this structure is actually used in temperate climates like ours, but over in Europe, to get the condensation that rises, warm air rises, hits the dome, which is a little cooler, and the moisture rolls down the sides, and Ron can show you that and explain it. So it's observation, and also deals with a moisture problem and helps you. It's not for the commercial beekeeper. I do understand that. A lot of what I'm saying is not for the commercial beekeeper. However, when you get into the data-driven type decisions, Etienne Tardif, north of 60beekeeping.com, he really gets into it. Oh dear. Just a second, I have to plug my okay, I had to plug the power in. My battery was running down. Okay, he keeps bees in the Yukon, this Etienne. And one of the ways he does it, it's really fascinating. When you study it, you start understanding a lot of things you already knew about bees make sense. We're not as far north as him, but he's only like 10 degrees farther north than we are. Not much more than that. And we are often listening to people who are 20 degrees latitude south of us, when maybe we should be listening more to the person who's northern climate, like us, and has that long days during the summer, short days during the winter. He does this really interesting statistics, and I am fascinated by this. We're doing the Broodminders, a sensor in each of the hive sites, because we're interested in it, and we're going to expand and include some scales for a lot of reasons, which make more sense if you spend some time going into it. So there he is. We are here. He is farther up, but actually 10 degrees north of us is, well, a little more than 10 degrees north of us, but that's a lot closer to our weather than Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, almost 20 degrees south of us. Broodminer, we're fascinated by it, and we're going to get the links up. There would be a live link, except that we are manual reading right now. We're going out and whenever we get time, reading on our cell phones. And you can look at that at the hive sites if you're interested. I'm about as far as I want to go. And if you have weather information, you can actually figure out how much your bees could be flying. Was your honey production low because the weather was not cooperative? for example? Or are you looking at maybe there's a pest control you're not seeing? It's time you really looked at tracheal mites or nosema or something else. And there are ways to crunch your numbers from your data and get flight hours and cluster hours. This Dick Rogers does it inside the United States, and that's, okay, is that North Carolina where he is? I think that's North Carolina. And then we have Etienne doing it basically up in the north. But just on my wonderful 1-acre farm, Ambient Weather, we got a weather station because the weather here does not match anything anywhere else. I can't use the highs, the lows, the rainfall, anything. None of it matches. It's as high as 5 degrees off quite often, and the rainfall is completely different. But here, for example, is from July 4th to today, basically yesterday. That's our temperatures. Yeah, that's the temperature. And just you can see there's a lot of variation. And that's to be expected. It shows the really low period, okay, in December. And also, this is easier for me to link this in with my journaling because I don't have to write down every day and try to figure out what if the temperature was higher or lower than usual. I can look back. This is an interesting system. And the reason I mention it is, if you are close to somebody who has one of these, you can go to ambientweather.com, and I believe you can just find them by entering in the street address. For example, if you enter in mine, you will come up, there's the little marker that I am here, and then it will tell you. And I don't know if it will tell you more than that. It will say, it says view 24-hour. I suspect you can see more data than that because I think I make it public when I join ambientweather.net. I was hoping some people would check that out because it looks to me like at least you see this, and then I suspect you can see more than that of what's happening. If you don't have a weather station and don't want to invest in one, but you know somebody else who is on this system, you could check in with them. So anyone who's close to me who wants to know a better local set of conditions, what the weather really was like this winter, compared to what they would see if they go and settle. Our nearest weather is Everett, Monroe, Snohomish always seem to have the same weather forecast. Woodinville seems to be closer to us, but we're not in any of those cities. So having our own is going to give me some data. I'd like to see if I could maximize honey production, know exactly when to raise queens, which is part of what the guy in the Yukon uses it for. Anyway, I have some, part of it you can tell how much sun your bees are getting. Overcast. I mean, who can say, well, it was kind of overcast, but then it cleared up. You can get an actual reading. Could you reasonably expect your bees to fly or not fly at certain times of the year? So anyway, I'm trying to figure out how to make this sort of public. This is, again, July 4th through yesterday, and a couple days ago now. And it's just, I think this could be really useful for somebody who's some people are more data oriented. We know that the battery ran out at the Sultan location. We got to get that battery replaced. I keep saying I'm going to bring you out some, Jessica. And they're ordinary batteries. It's just a pain to go out and get a specific type of battery. But this can tell you through the first half of December, they were raising brood. The sensor may not have been perfectly placed, but definitely they were raising brood. And keeping the outside humidity, which it shows outside temperatures and inside temperature and outside humidity and inside humidity. And the gray strips are the brood ranges. And if your sensor is perfectly placed, it does stay in there. I should stop talking. This I showed at the last monthly meeting, but I was really fascinated by the fact that the bees could lower the humidity to brood range, this gray area here, even when it was close to 100% humidity outside, which it is a lot of the winter. I wasn't amazed at the temperature raising, but I'm amazed at, I don't quite understand the mechanism by which they lower the humidity, ventilate through the hive, when it's 95 to 100% humidity outside. Okay, I should stop talking. I will stop sharing and we will stop the recording. Stopping the